Here is a sense of melancholy and loss. This is very particular to romantic landscapes. You will also notice there is very little sky here. The framing device of the trees now becomes quite predominant in the picture. Nature here and romantic landscapes, the nature of this is very different from what we saw in the earlier pictures by Constable. It's no longer serene. There is a sense of disturbance here, of something that is not particularly right, or it may be simply a feeling of loss. Here is a picture that combines the sublime and you might even think the pastoral. It's actually a very beautiful moonlight picture. When you think of the word romantic, you often think of moonlight, the sea, the sky. Here we have a calmness. It's not quite pastoral because we're not looking at country, we're looking at water. But here, the water is calm. But notice it's very dark, too, black. The moonlight illuminates this single ship floating alone in the sea. The idea of isolation, the idea of being apart from something. The fact that the sky goes way into the background. It's not menacing yet, but it's not very comforting either. There's a darkness to the whole picture. So, you're not quite sure. Here there is what we call, in English we call the word unease. You don't feel at ease, you don't feel comfortable. There's something here that bothers us. This is a particular image that expresses this view. And people looking at this in a gallery will be very touched by the fact of this singular ship floating in the moonlight. Now, is this an abandoned ship? Is this a ship of ghosts? Is it a ship of dead people? We're not sure. But as you can see, there's a certain lack of light to it. Beautiful, isn't it? Next. Now we go to a French painter, Delacroix. He was a friend of Chopin. He painted landscapes, but he did something quite different here. His landscapes are filled with people, but the people themselves are romantically portrayed. They are in situations of great disturbance. The compositions are very dramatic. There are many twisted figures. The landscape is far in the distance. It seems to be somewhat menacing even to the people as they struggle in it. So here's an image of romantic struggle. And Eugène Delacroix shows us, in many of his paintings, this particular form of landscape. You can see what we are looking at is a battle. This is not a political statement. This is a romantic statement. We are seeing the magnificent horror, almost the sublime terror of what war can look like. Notice the horses as they are in the foreground. Each one has a very different dramatic pose. In particular, you see on the right, the white horse that is rising up on its back legs, perhaps in fear. You can see lower down a horse that has been crippled or killed. In the background, the army seems to go way into this barren landscape. Notice this is not a very pretty countryside. And the flaming sky, is this because of the sun or is it because of fires from the war? So this is a romanticized view of war. It shows its sublime but horrible beauty. You can tell it is romantic because of their very beautiful compositions, particularly in the front with the four animals. Because romantic painters were actually fascinated by not only human figures, but animal figures in nature. The next picture will show you this very specifically. This is a classic romantic picture of the free spirit of an unspoiled natural being. In this case, it's a wild horse. Notice the sky. There's some lightning striking in the background. We see turbulence, once again, the romantic skyscape. But here we have the horse. The horse has no rider. He's free. He may be in danger. But this is a great image of romantic freedom. The fact that you can express yourself, that you're out in nature, that there is no enclosing quality. And notice the shape of the horse. Look at the face. The eye of the horse is wild and strange. And the pose that it takes is almost torture. This is very typical of the romantic imagination. Once again, look at the sky. The sky is like the sea. It's dark, it's turbulent, it's threatening. The sky is a very important part of romantic landscape. Now we go, finally, to a Canadian. Now, Paul Kane is a romantic painter because he follows many of the ideas of the French philosopher Rousseau, who you may have known or have been taught. Rousseau said something very interesting about people who live within nature. He called them noble people, meaning that they were rich, that they had a sense of importance. But the kind of people who have this nobility are usually people who are living in the wilds. And what more noble creature could you find than the North American Indian? When he was discovered as a nation and as a culture, he captured the romantic imagination very much. Because people were fascinated by the fact that this was a civilization without cities, without industry. It was a natural way of living. They were completely part of nature, and they had a great beauty to them as well. They were called noble savages. It's an ironic term. How can you be both savage and noble? But Rousseau puts the idea together, which is a very romantic coupling of the two words. Paul Kane, being educated in the romantic tradition, goes out into the wilds of Canada, and he looks at these noble savages. Here is one of his famous paintings. Notice we are on water again. Water is a very popular element. Notice the water here is pastoral, it's calm, it's not threatening. The people in it are working, like the peasants were in the very early pictures, but you'll notice they're working in darkness at night. The surrounding trees are the wilderness of Canada. Very much a natural but a good place where these Indians are living. The part that makes it partially romantic, almost sublime, is the use of the fire. Here the Indians are fishing at night. They're going out with these great torches. The man in the canoe is raising up his spear because the natives went what was called night fishing then, because the fish would come out. And because these rivers were so filled with the fresh fish, they had great plenty. You will notice too that this is characteristic. In the background you can see the house of the native, the teepee. There was a fascination in the romantic imagination with the technology of the noble savage. Here the technology is the canoe made out of wood and tree bark. This was a fascination. However, you can see there's nothing threatening here. There's a sublime calm to this picture, although it is very romantic because of the other element. Finally, we look at a very romantic picture. Notice the sky. This is either at dawn or at sunset. The sky is very dramatic with great sweeping clouds. The landscape itself is beautiful and unspoiled. Notice the water on the right side of the screen. It has a pastoral, calm quality to it. As the landscape goes towards the sun, you can see that it's Canadian in the sense it's got rocks and particular wild trees. It's not like the European landscape. And as you can see, this is a portrait This is a very pastoral picture, really. You can see the native Indians with their dog. You can see them relaxing. Only one person seems to be working, a housewife making food. You'll notice, too, the canoes. This is the technology. But the key thing is the composition of the pyramids. The teepees that were made out of wood and covered with bark from trees. This was a fascination for the Romantic painters. This is not a realistic picture. This is not an actual, it's not like a photograph like the National Geographic showing us how people actually live. This is a Romantic interpretation. What makes it so is the use of the sky, the time of day, the sunlight, the combination of the water, and the composition of the picture. Romantic landscapes are very composed landscapes. They are very artistic in their picturesque quality. Now, many of these paintings were available to the general public through art galleries. This was really at the same time, and the paintings were usually very large, big pictures. If you go to the Louvre in Paris, you can see many of these landscapes by Delacroix, and they are enormous pictures. They were meant to be big and to make a great effect. In the same way that when we go to the cinema, we sometimes have these enormous screens where we see our actors. Same idea. Romanticism, many ideas from it still exist in our society, even though we don't consider ourselves a romantic thinking society now. This ends the slideshow. We hope what you saw from this were a number of things. First of all, the theme of the pastoral and the sublime. Two ways that artists interpreted nature. Two ways they expressed the romantic concept of feeling in a pictorial sense. And rather than using poetry or novels, what they did is they went out and they invented the world through their landscape and romantic eyes. This picture you see at the beginning, by the way, is taken from a Turner painting. And we can see the sky above. There are the two ideas for you. And you've seen the names and you've seen the photograph. Piero is going to just very quickly run through it again so you can have a review of the pictures. Keep in mind all the different elements and how they change and how they are manipulated by the artists themselves.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Okay.